Ladies and gentlemen, Mary and I are simply delighted all of you have joined us tonight as we honor Pat and Tom. Their service and generosity loom large, and their legacy of service echoes to the many generations of their family who is with them tonight. So this is their evening, this is Tom's and Pat's evening, and I think we should start it off by welcoming them to their party. Tom and Pat, we are so glad you're here, and we thank you for everything that you do. There could be no better person to introduce tonight's honorees than one of San Antonio's most iconic businessmen and their lifelong friend, our distinguished honorary chair. Please welcome to the podium Bartell Zachary.
It's really a pleasure for me to make a few remarks about a very good friend, but more than that, a great friend of the Institute. Tonight we're celebrating the lives of two very special people in the history of the Health Science Center, Patricia and Tom Frost. And they have been linked to the center since it was created by the Texas legislature. There are hurdles overcome, and they are countless. Its location, its growth, its reputation, its reach into South Texas, its scope, its impact, and its place in the San Antonio community and the world of medicine, to me, is simply breathtaking. Of course, there are many who have made the reality of this center possible, but no team has done more than the team of Pat and Tom Frost. For their vision and their nurturing support since its beginning that have touched so many lives and spawned such diverse thrusts as the Children's Cancer Institute, the Barshop Aging Center, and especially the Cancer Therapy and Research Center. It is just important that they be recognized for what they have accomplished, but more especially for the example that they've set for all of us. It's a bit ironic to me when I see that Tom has been involved in such a growing, diverse focus on health, that it's had an influence in moving Tom in the direction of art, science, and passion related to golf. It's interesting that that is where he has applied himself with what I'm told are mixed results. But we know, and you've heard our bishop here a little earlier this evening, but he has an expression that in the fullness of time, Tom will conquer it. This evening we say a heartfelt thanks to both Pat and Tom Frost for all they've done for so many years that make possible the dynamic, grand, and extraordinary life-saving resource and life-changing resource that is the Health Science Center of San Antonio. Thanks for recognizing Tom and being here for Tom and Pat.
Well, thank you, Bartell. I'd like to say to everyone here in this room that it's been a real pleasure to have you, and also, since I'm a little older, say with your father, in so many things that have helped grow and develop this community, our businesses, our hospitals, and our churches, and our educational institutions. It's a real pleasure that this community has people like Bartell and his family, and Molly was right with us too on many things that they've done. So I thank them. And I particularly want to thank you, Bill, for tonight. I appreciate your inviting me to be here because it's been an important thing in my life as to how well this has been done. And I don't take credit for the doing well of it, but I think you and your staff and the others in the medical center, we get a big hand for such a marvelous, we never dreamt it would be anything that we have now. Before I go any farther, I've got to especially recognize somebody who was with me for 63 years of all of this journey here in San Antonio, and had her knees in the pews at Christ Episcopal Church for both this medical center and Methodist Hospital in it when they were really struggling. And that is to recognize my wife, Pat, for nothing that I have done would ever have any meaningful thing if it were not for her. Pat, I thank you. I'm going to tell you a story. I hope it won't be too long, but this involves every single one of you in this room. I'm going to tell you about a young man that back in early school days was exposed to the classics, and one of the things that he has always remembered was a poem by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. It's called Sonnet 43 of the Sonnets to the Portuguese. It's her most famous poem, I think, and many of you all probably know how it goes. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach. Well, this has been something that's been at the heart of that young man for many years. And I'll fast forward you from the early school days when he learned of this poem, back later on to marriage, to a family, to children, and a career. And at some point in his life, at some point there, he fell in love with the idea of a medical center and a medical school here in this community. One of the things that's important is that we didn't have that. We had a few hospitals and were really less. I can remember very well being told that young man knew that we had less hospital beds than the average for our population for most communities, and a medical center would improve that. So joining the resuscitated medical foundation that didn't have the real luck it wanted in getting the University of Texas second medical school, it went to Dallas, but that medical foundation was still alive. He joined that foundation and worked hard for the idea of a medical school and a medical center. He was invited to be also a part of a group of large taxpayers who called on the county judge when the vote was at 2-2 for building a new teaching hospital here to bring the medical center to San Antonio. And there, the county judge agreed, and the taxes were doubled to all of us in San Antonio for the wonderful university hospital that we now have. This young man also raised money to augment the salary of the very first dean of the medical school. I don't think it was much money. I think we probably almost spill a little less than that each day in our lives. But that was another effort, and there was also a drive to raise money to build a new hospital. All the rest of them were pretty much in the town, and that was the argument. The new one was going to be in the new medical center with the medical school. All during his life, that young man has spent time raising money, supporting, abating, and encouraging the development of this medical center. And of course, what we now call the Health Science Center is even a much greater effort or part of that than could have been just a mere medical school. But I think each and every one of you here tonight will agree that the level of care, the level of medical care in this community is many, many times greater today than it was before the university came with the Health Science Center here in San Antonio. It's a wonderful thing, and I think it's probably no secret to you, and you'd already figured it out, that that young man that spent all that effort in those days, his response was many times over by what has happened at this medical center. And each and every one of you are responsible for it. I think the report of the Medical Foundation this year said 29,000 people are in medical employment at the medical center. 29,000 others are in other administrative jobs, and 12,000 volunteers work there every year. Every year, or every day now. That's 70,000 people, and they take care of over 500,000, both in-house and outpatient care this last year. It's something that I think each and every one of us here can be very proud of, and I know that I have been rewarded many times over because my family has been the recipient of so many things. My father spent his last days there before he died of cancer, and life, the circle of life is shown by the fact that 12 of my grandchildren and my one great-grandson have been born there in that hospital. Others in the family, including a cousin who had one of the early bone transplants, her life was extended by the Health Science Center. I'm going to say that my wife herself would not be here tonight if it were not for the care of two of the doctors in the teaching hospital that to this day are still doing research there. A son was saved from a ruptured increment when he had an accident, and my niece was brought there after a motorcycle accident and had her leg saved. I could go on and on because there have been so many other ways that our family has benefited by consultation, particularly with members of the medical school, of the faculty. But I want to let you know that Elizabeth Barrett Browning comes around now in full circle. As I say to each and every one of you in this room who've done so much, both in your practice, in your work, in your interest, your volunteering, and your philanthropy to build this medical center, and particularly the Health Science Center. So I say over and again, Elizabeth Barrett Browning's words ring in my heart tonight when I say to each and every one of you, how do I love thee? Let me count the ways. My family's cup runs over with what you have done for us, and we know that your goodness and your loving kindness will follow us all the days of our life. Thank you.
Tom, thank you very much. We appreciate your allowing us to honor you and Patricia this evening. Thank you for your insightful observations about the early days, a time when the Health Science Center, the CTRC, the South Texas Medical Center, and all its hospitals came to life, in part because of the faith you had in the future and your willingness to accept risk. You know, when Tom and leaders of San Antonio inaugurated these new medical efforts, they made a pledge to our city to give their best effort to improve health care, to foster research, and to light the lamp of education. And in their happiest moments, they couldn't have dreamt where that path that they started on would lead them. They couldn't have appreciated the success it would bring to San Antonio and to the region. Most importantly, as Tom said, the comfort it would bring to countless numbers of families whose lives would be enriched, or to those whose lives would be saved. So while a promise to improve the health and educational prospects in our city was the impetus for action, it's the second meaning of the word of the evening, promise, that I find so exciting. Through the three complementary missions of the Health Science Center, healing, discovery, education, there's real hope for all of us that we will see in our lifetime cures for the diseases we dread most. Now, you might ask, what are the ingredients that most animate progress in science and healthcare? What matters the most? Opinions will differ greatly, as they should, but I have three choices as critical elements, and they are curiosity, creativity, and persistence. These three attributes must be in abundant supply, as they were recently in a story told by the British educational scholar Sir Ken Robinson of a group of 6-year-olds working on a classroom art project. The teacher in the class had stopped at the desk of a little girl concentrating on her work, and she asked the student, "What are you drawing?" The little girl answered, "I'm drawing God." But the teacher said, "No one knows what God looks like." To which the little girl answered, "Well, they will in a minute." See, the key, the bold advances that we have to take is to take the approach of that little girl. First, you have to answer a question everybody wants to know the answer to be unafraid to fail, and to be persistent. We have to keep trying because what's at stake here is something beyond our ability to describe precious. It's a human life. So there are thousands of examples of how persistence in medicine changed history, thousands of them. But I'll admit to favoring the one that saved my life. The story of a son of Texas named Don Thomas. He was the son of a physician and a graduate of the Mart, Texas High School. He graduated 8th in his high school class out of 15. And then he enrolled at the University of Texas at Austin. Now, while he was in Austin, he lived what he describes himself as a, quote, full social life. I can tell by the reaction in this room that there are some of you who know what that means. I, of course, was head down the entire time in college and have no idea what that entails, but maybe you can tell me later. But as fortune would have it, while he was at school in Austin, he became fascinated by chemistry, and he earned both bachelor's and master's degree in science. By the time he finished medical school at Harvard, he had the unique and then unprecedented idea that bone marrow that was disordered or diseased could be completely replaced by bone marrow from a healthy individual. And so primary bone marrow disorders, such as aplastic anemia or leukemia or sickle cell disease, could be cured by this procedure. 3 decades, 30 years of frustration followed, characterized by glacial progress, by skepticism, by failure. But finally, in the late 1960s, there was some modest success with his efforts, and there was increasing survival among bone marrow transplant recipients. He recruited more scientists into the field, and breakthroughs began to proliferate. By 1985, 35 years after he started, there were no fewer than 200 centers around the world that were doing stem cell transplants for these diseases. And in 2012, in the year I had a stem cell transplant, the 1 millionth person to receive this treatment was identified. Ladies and gentlemen, believe me, no one who knew Don Thomas in Mart, Texas, in high school would have predicted that he would receive, as he did, the Nobel Prize for Medicine in 1991. So our promise must be to continue the work we do to encourage a student to emerge from our ranks to become a Don Thomas, who through her contributions will change the world, to support discovery that will diminish or eliminate disease, and to provide every day, every single day, the best care compassionately delivered. And we are, as we have always been, aided and inspired by each of you, who through your support and by your presence here tonight in honoring Tom and Pat have brought our lofty goals closer to success. So as we sit here tonight enjoying each other's company, we are forced to admit, we have to admit, as the art teacher in that class of young children admitted, we don't know now what the cures for all cancers, dementia, or heart disease look like. But if our compass is true, if we retain our resolve and we continue to enjoy your abiding support, we will, as that little girl promised, know these answers in just a minute. God bless you all. Thanks for being here tonight.